I'm now joined by Macy Chiasson, who's in Dallas during the coronavirus scare right now. Are you home by yourself? I know you have a dog with you.
I have my dog with me. She's been with me since day one. Uh, but fortunately, I have my partner right now, so I'm not completely alone. I can't imagine like being single during this whole pandemic situation. I'd be going insane right now.
Yeah, it's obviously good to have a company. I've got my three kids, my wife, so I'm more than covered in that department. Lots to do.
Are, from what I heard, like friends with kids, I'm not sure. I feel like you might be lying. I mean, is it really that great having your three kids at home right now?
It's not bad, I have them home anyways. Usually, I get home from work and they're all home anyways. So,
You said that with a little bit of despair. You're like, it's not that bad.
no, it's fun. It's fun.
It's
I
a
get to
whisper.
I get to
Yeah,
connect with them, which is good. So I can't complain about that. Um,
that's
so
good.
So what's the situation with your training? I mean, I know that the gym, Fortis MMA, is closed right now, but are you able to
Right.
go occasionally for one-on-one lessons or anything along those lines?
No. Well, my striking coach, he's got two kids. They're really young. One of them's not even a year old yet. So just the risk factor of them possibly getting exposed to something is just far too high, especially them being that young. So I haven't been able to work with my striking coach. I haven't been to Fortis. Fortis is shut down, I mean, you're not allowed in a gym. And I think honestly, the only way if I were able to get into a gym with a partner would be if we both quarantined at the gym, from my understanding, I know that a few people have done that because they weren't sure if they were fighting on one of the UFC cards or not. But as of right now, I've just kind of been making up my own workouts. As soon as this whole thing went down, I went to the store and I bought a barbell. I bought some plates. So the only thing that I've really been able to keep up and control is kind of my conditioning and my strength training. I have been teaching my partner a little bit of jujitsu. She's pretty athletic. But I always tell her I'm like the most dangerous people to train with are like the slightly trained people that are like extremely strong and spastic. So I'm trying real hard to just not get hurt right now.
Well, I mean, you'll know who it is that's going to hurt you though. You've got one training partner
Uh,
at the moment.
yeah, for sure. But there's some things that she can do for me. It's not the same. It takes a skill to be able to hold mitts for a professional. It's a certain skill set. So I'm only able to really control the controllables, and I think that's how it is for everyone right now.
Now, a lot of people are saying, and it surprises me when I ask, if the UFC offered you a fight right now, would you take it if it was in a month's time? And a lot of them are like, yeah, oh yeah, anytime, any place. But I feel like it would be under really suboptimal conditions.
Right.
What camp are you in? If I were to say, a month from now, the UFC wants you to go to Vegas and fight at the Apex, what's your answer?
I would yes, absolutely. I was kind of for my coach and I were ready for a call as soon as we found out that Amanda dropped out of the fight. I was like, look, I'll fight at 145 in 2 weeks. I'll do it. I mean, none of us have really had an actual, legitimate camp. And I mean, it's not like my skill sets were going to get any better over the form of like 4 weeks. I haven't hit mitts in 4 weeks, but I'm able to shadow box. I'm able to strength train. I'm able to control my diet. So if I can make 145 in 2 weeks, I'd absolutely do it. And if they called me and say, hey, in a month and a half, we might have a fight for you at 135, I'm down for that as well. So I'm kind of in a place to where I can move up or, continue to fight at 35 under the circumstances.
Yeah, speaking of which, with Amanda, she pulled out of the May 9th fight because of, I guess, what I had mentioned before, that the
Yeah.
training situation is not optimal. I think for champions in specific, it's something that they really need to look carefully at because of how much comes with being a champion financially.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It's expensive. I mean, people don't understand how expensive actual fight camps are, and um, it's not like the NFL where you're paid a contract over a certain amount of time and everything is kind of given to you. You have to pay for everything. You have to pay for training partners. You have to pay your coaches. There's a lot that goes into a fight camp.
Yeah, looking at your season of The Ultimate Fighter, everybody was supposed to be fighting at 145, and it seems everybody from the show, I guess with the exception of Leah Letson, who's recently declared herself to be a featherweight, is moving down to bantamweight, yourself included. Do you see a future for yourself at featherweight? I mean, you'd be a top 3 featherweight likely as soon as you made the jump.
Well, Larissa Pacheco fights for PFL now, and she was in that tournament at 155. So she actually moved up to like a weight class. I'm not sure if she actually fought at 135 before the show, but she's a 155er now. And the reason that I didn't want to fight at 145 right when I started in the UFC was because I wanted to give myself a chance at 135, and moving back up to 45, I would also have to get a little bit bigger because I'm kind of in between, which is good, right? It's good to be kind of at that weight in between where you can move up and fight or you can move down. But there's, if I'm going to do 135, I'm going to do it right. If I'm going to do 145, I'm going to do it right. So I would like to add a little bit more mass to my body before moving to 145. But it's, I'm kind of at that point right now to where I wouldn't mind fighting at 145 or 135.
You made an interesting statement the other day. Tony Ferguson decided arbitrarily to make 155 pounds. And you mentioned that because he dropped 24 pounds, had a female made a similar cut in terms of percentage, that they'd get all kinds of flack from whether it's media, fans, I don't know. Give me your rationale of why you think there's a double standard there.
And look, like just to put things in a little bit of perspective, I mean, I'm not shaming Tony Ferguson at all. I mean, I think it's fine. If you want to make your weight and drop however many pounds and however many days, that's your business. If that's something that you do all the time, do it, right? If something went wrong and that's what you have to do, then you have to do it. If it's a choice, it's a choice, and I'm not shaming someone for doing that, but all I'm trying to bring to light is that, I think women get shamed for such things, especially being in certain weight classes. You have people, it's usually men, and it's not always a one-side thing. It can be both routes, because I think women these days in MMA or boxing or any sort of combat sport feel like they have to sell themselves in order to get attention, instead of trying to get attention the right way. I'd rather have 10,000 followers that actually follow me because they like the way I fight than because me posting a bathing suit picture, and I feel like that's what most of these women have to do in order to get attention. And it really sucks. I hate it. I hate that, the sport is kind of coming to that. But with that being said, it's just a lot of body shaming, with men. And I've heard of some crazy ass weight cuts from dudes in a matter of days, and I've done a crazy weight cut in a matter of days just because maybe my nutrition wasn't on point, something went wrong. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with women during a weight cut. And I just think that, even when I've made 136, and I didn't have the easiest time making 136, but I had a lot of people that were commenting like, oh, well, you should move up a weight class, or you should do this, you should do that. I just feel like a lot of people have a lot of things to say about women, especially if they come in a pound over. It shouldn't be a sex thing. It should be more of, it's a fighter thing, and I just think that women get such a bad rap. I don't know if I'm the only one. I'm definitely not the only one that thinks that. I feel like maybe you have an input or two about that as well.
Well, I go the other way. I think that people should be looking at women differently than men because the biology is different, and it's actually harder for women to cut weight because of, like you mentioned, things can go wrong from a biological standpoint. Something that men don't have to deal with, obviously, is their cycle on a monthly basis. So people should actually be more understanding if women miss weight, because it's almost impossible to plan for something that could, spring up at any time and cause a complication that men wouldn't ordinarily face.
For sure. And I'm not trying to say that, they shouldn't have an opinion. I think everyone's entitled to an opinion, and I understand that. I just feel like people have more to say when it's a female that misses weight, or it's a female that's cutting a lot of weight, rather than, in comparison to men. And, and most of the comments that I saw was like, oh, he's just insane, blah, blah, blah. And I know a lot of women that cut a lot of weight and people would be like, oh my God, like she should move up a weight class. What is she doing? It's just the tone in the comments. It just doesn't make sense to me. But then again, that's when we rewind back to women having a bad rap and, men being more fixated on what the woman looks like than the way she performs.
Yeah, so I mean that like you mentioned is obviously something that has sprung up, I guess especially in recent years. It seems like it's becoming more
Yeah.
and more prevalent in the sport, and I don't know what can be done to correct that, or if even the athletes want it to be corrected. I'm sure that some do and
Yeah.
some don't. Like you mentioned, your social media following is something that you'd like to see based on your performances rather than outside
Right.
factors.
Right. And I understand, like, I'm all for people, putting out pictures of like what kind of person they are, who they are. But if every single photo that you're posting is you in a lingerie shot or like you with your shirt off, like in, underwear or whatever. I mean, I understand like we fight in sports bras. Like that's a part of what we do. But it just seems like most of these women are just trying so hard. And it's just, but then again, I feel like that's what they feel like they have to do in order to get noticed. And it's horrible. It sucks.
Yeah. So, do you think there's anything that can be done to change that at all, or is there anything that you would say to somebody who feels like they need to do that in order to get that kind of attention?
I don't know. I just think like us as women, us as like the female race, like we need to do a little bit better at being a better role model to not just like children and younger girls, but to just people in general. I mean, if you want men to respect you or if you want society to respect you, you need to be a little bit more respectful. And I think it's okay every now and then to get a little racy and like post a lingerie shot. But if that's what your whole entire career is based off of, then I don't understand what you're doing. You know, it just really degrades the sport. It really does. And you don't see a lot of Olympians, like especially female athletes, track stars, basketball. You don't see them doing stuff like that. And it really just degrades the sport, I believe.
Well, the sport's created an interesting dynamic because you can't really think of any other professional sports, at least at the level that the UFC is or mixed martial arts is, where you have a female main event and then you have males in the co-main event, where women will take
Right.
center stage and be the featured, part of the event. So I think
Right.
that creates an interesting dynamic because it's nothing that people are really used to. You're used to men's tennis and
Right.
women's tennis, men's golf, men's
Right.
basketball, women's basketball, instead of everything being on the same platform.
Oh, for sure, 100%. Yeah, and we're finally singled out, as women, as strong women, to really portray what we should be like in sports. And then you're taking, and it's not everyone. I'm not going to sit here and say it's every single female, but it's most of the ones that, I guess if I walked up to a guy and I said, name three female UFC fighters, they'd probably say Paige Van Zant, they would say Amanda Nunes, and then probably another person that comes to mind that, oh, they think's hot. So, which is good. I mean, there needs to have that, attractive factor to someone that you enjoy watching. But if that's the only thing that the sport is solely based off of, like that people want to go and see, it's just, I just think it's a really bad place to be for the sport. But like I said, it's not everyone. I just feel like it's becoming more and more prevalent.
I'm curious about your last two fights and what you've learned from those. Obviously, the fight with Lena Landsberg didn't go your way. You were undefeated before that. And then your most recent fight, you went the
Yeah.
distance, and you had a dominant performance, but it was the longest that you'd been in the cage for, outside of,
Right.
in a win of yours. And the output was a lot
Yeah.
higher. So walk me through what you've learned from both of those situations.
Man, the Lena Landsberg fight is one of those fights that's like gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. And it's so weird because like I train, and I'm not just like you can ask any UFC athlete, female athlete, like, oh, like I'm sure you train hard. Like they'll say they train hard, right? And I train so hard. I mean, I'll probably train anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day with little to none off days, which is terrible. I don't recommend that. You should always have a rest day, you know? And man, like the way I look at it is that I always like, it's so weird. Like it's a self-inflicting type thing. Like I have to torture myself in order to feel like I'm training the right way. Like I put myself through the worst training sessions, just rigorous, just nonstop, just, which is awful for your body. Like your body can do a lot of things, but your body needs time to rest. And I put myself through an insane camp. And even my coach, my head coach, Safe, was like, Macy, I need you to take a day off. Macy, I need you to tone it down. Because literally every day I was redlining for that camp, because Lena was a big fight for me, and she was a ranked opponent. She had been in the UFC for a long time. So I wanted to make sure that when I fought her, I was going to be 150%. Well, I literally just drove myself into the ground day in, day out for that fight. I didn't allow myself to take the required days off, of rest. And I also lost all of my stuff in that crane crash with my apartment, like just a few months before. So I was kind of like in a weird place. And this isn't me trying to make excuses. This is just kind of me trying to explain where my head was at for that fight, because I'm such a mental, like I have great attributes as far as fighting, but a lot of it comes from like my mentality. I feel like I've gotten this far because I'm such a strongly mentally sound person. And by the time I got to that fight, when I got in the cage, I was just kind of like, oh my God, like I am so like burnt out. Like I didn't have that adrenaline factor. I was just like, I'm just ready to do this and get it over with. It was insane.
So I guess you did learn something from that fight that, that's probably helped you. The fact that it drives you in every night is probably going to be something that helps you down the road.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and just what I was saying about the Lundberg fight, and she's a great fighter. She's a grinder and she knows how to win. And I mean, I should have easily won that fight, and I know I can beat her. There's no doubt about that. And it was just a matter of the fact that I just didn't show up that night. It just was not myself, and usually I get really hyped up in the back and I'm like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this. I've been tortured for the last like whatever months of training, and I was just like really calm, which is weird. Like I'm usually not like that chill. So I just knew like something was wrong, right before I walked out. But mentality aside, the technicality of it was that I didn't chain wrestle enough. I didn't go back out in the open and strike. I mean, she did not want to stand up with me. It became a wrestling match, and it was I just was not in the right headspace, and so the technical aspect of it was just all messed up, just all wrong. And I think I needed that in order to really just reassess myself and what I need to work on and what could happen in there. And so I'm pretty happy. I'm not happy that I lost, but I'm happy with the fact that I could learn something from a loss, and I think that's what most athletes can go ahead and say about themselves when they don't show up, and when they do, they don't get that win, and so I think it helped me prepare a lot better for my next fight. I mean, my cardio was on point. I mean, I was waking up every day for my last camp. I was waking up every day at a resting heart rate of 34. I mean, I was in the middle of a marathon training, and I was, I took adequate days off like I should have for my fight against Lena, but I was in really great shape from my last fight when we had that short notice opponent change.
So what was the big change? You're going home with Coach Safe, and you're flying back. You've dropped your first fight. What's the advice he gives you, and what do you take from that helped change you and get you back on track?
He just told me, he's like, you came into the UFC at 2-0. He's like, you're like such a baby in the UFC. He said basically like you're growing up as a pro, like fighting the best people in the world, and he's like, you need to take a step back and just kind of give yourself a pat on the back at, what you've accomplished so far, what you've done, just because, you had this loss doesn't mean that you're a shitty fighter. It just means that there was something that went wrong technically, and it happens, even the best in the world lose. Maybe this isn't the one that you wanted to lose, right? I'd rather lose in a title fight, but nothing's perfect. And I think that's what makes everyone who they are. And I really beat myself up over it. Like right after my fight, I was like, I want another fight right now. I was like, we need to get me back in there. I want to fight someone right now. I need to condemn myself.
Yeah, well, you were able to get it back. You were able to win your last fight. It was a short notice opponent. What did you know about Shanna before you fought her? Did you know anything about her?
Not really. We went and watched a few fights, right when we got the call, and I mean, she has really good taekwondo, and she honestly and I thought she hadn't been in a camp, so I didn't think that she was going to be in that good of shape. But actually, she was in a camp because she was supposed to fight for Invicta the week before, and she ended up getting sick. I think she had like the flu or something like that. Well, now that we look back, it could have been Corona. But no, I think she had the flu, and so she ended up getting pulled from the card. So she actually was in a full camp whenever she got the call from the UFC for a short notice replacement. So we didn't really know too much about her. We just knew that, 7-2. She's fought in Invicta a few times against some legit opponents. She fought at 135 and 125, but she was more of a 125er. So she didn't really have to cut much weight, I don't think, for the short notice fight against me.
Imagine getting the flu and then the next week you're in the UFC because you couldn't fight in your last fight. That seems kind of strange.
Yeah. It does, yeah. It really does seem strange. But you know what? Kudos to her. She really was sick, and she jumped in last minute. It's a win-win situation for her. You get a UFC contract, you just go and fight. So there's nothing she really could have lost. And, I didn't realize that the elevation was going to have such an impact just because my conditioning was so good. And it was insane. Like whenever I was on like a top position on her on the ground, which is like usually where I like to finish most of my opponents, it literally felt like somebody was like holding my arm back every time I would try to punch. It was insane how much elevation can affect your training.
What was that? That was the Rio Rancho card?
Yeah, it was like 6,500 elevation, and Dallas is like 300.
Yeah, I think Rio Rancho is like the second highest point in North America in terms of elevation. Higher than
Okay.
Denver, higher than like almost anywhere else.
Yeah, one of my strength coaches was asking me, he's like, how do you think that's going to affect you? I was like, I don't think it will.
Well,
But,
now we know.
whatever. We got the job done.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting circumstance, and I guess the guys that train in New Mexico under Greg Jackson can relate. Well, thanks for this, Macy. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing your next fight. I don't know how the UFC schedule is going to shake out. We're going to probably know a little bit more in about a month's time,
Yeah.
but hopefully you're able to turn it around quickly, and hopefully your teammate Uriah has some success when he steps in there on May 9th.
Yeah, I have a feeling that as soon as all this stuff's lifted, that they're going to be cranking out fights like every week. So we're going to be pretty active once this whole thing is over with. But thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day since you have a lot going on right now. I know it's busy.
Yeah. We're all just tons of plans. I was gonna go to the mall. I was gonna hang out with some friends, go to the bar. But you know what? For you, Macy, I decided to stay home.
Awesome. That was the right decision.